You're all from the media, right? Just kidding, everybody.
Welcome again, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kurt Bauer. I'm President and CEO of Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce. We want to welcome you to this special event that we put together just for this occasion. I like to say that this is kind of the WMC VIPs. Some of our board, some of our donors and contributors and sponsors, and some various friends, including my parents who are from Beloit, Rock Countyans with the Speaker Ryan. Let me just say a few words. Jay Smith is our chairman, and he wasn't able to be here today. He's accepting an award for lifetime achievement in the plastics industry down in Orlando. But he's kind of set the stage for, I think, this conversation we're going to have today, because he's really emphasizing statesmanship in his chairmanship. We all need to elevate the debate. We all need to have constructive debates. And I can't think of anybody who models that more than Speaker Ryan. He has shown incredible integrity, incredible intelligence, and I think he has elevated the debate with his civility. I am incredibly honored to welcome to the WMC podium the favorite son of the state of Wisconsin, the highest ranking Wisconsinite in state history, Paul Ryan.
Thanks, Kurt. Wow. Yeah, go figure. When I was, sailing out here on Wednesday mornings when I was, 12 years old, I'm in Dota. I just pointed the right way, right? Yeah. I never would have thought I would have got elected to Congress, much less Speaker of the House. Only in America can you have the ability to do these kinds of things. What I thought I would do is kind of walk you through what is actually happening in Congress and in law and in the country. We started this term having run on an agenda we called the Better Way. And that agenda was our attempt to get the country on the right track on a lot of critical issues, especially economic issues. We saw a military that was being hollowed out. We saw a regulatory system that was really stifling businesses. We saw a tax code that was the worst in the industrialized world. And we saw a lot of issues that workforce development that needed to be dealt with. So we sort of painstakingly started executing this agenda this year. I'm very pleased that the House has passed over 500 bills already in these last 15 months. That's one of the best production rates of getting things through Congress in the House and we've had in a generation. We passed our regulatory reform agenda through several forms of different bills. There's this thing called the Congressional Review Act. It's a bill that you can repeal a regulation, and that repeal of the regulation cannot be filibustered. It's only one of two things that cannot be filibustered. It was done once in the last 20 years. We've done 15 already. The 16th is working its way through the system. So we feel like our regulatory relief agenda is well on its way. Pat knows this story all too well from her industry. And then we wanted to make sure that we worked on our tax reform. The rewrite of the tax code, I think, is probably the biggest achievement we've had this year. But we really believe it's going to reset this economy and put a foundation, a bedrock under this economy that will last for an entire generation, because it's going to make our economy so much stronger. I was just over at American Family. American Family gave a bonus of $1,000 to 11,000 employees. American Family increased their education benefits to the maximum amount the IRS allows you for education benefits for their employees, for tuition repayment. They made a huge donation in their charitable foundation, which comes to the benefit of Madison. That's just one example of one company in this one town. That's happening across America. Millions of people are getting bonuses in all these different companies. We're seeing hundreds of billions of dollars of money coming from overseas, coming back into this country, being reinvested. Apple itself is bringing $350 billion back and going to hire 20,000 Americans in a new campus they're looking at the sites right now to build. So the kind of economic growth that we were hoping to unleash with tax reform is exactly what is happening. What I'm most pleased about is the fact that our kind of businesses here in Wisconsin, which are manufacturers, which are farmers, which are sort of middle to small businesses, they're really seeing the benefits of tax reform. They can compete on a level playing field with the rest of the world because they're taxed about the same rate, and they can write off all of those investments in their businesses in the year in which it takes place, And when you're a big manufacturing state like ours, that's tremendously helpful. And now we're not taxing our businesses so much more, or even more, than our foreign competitors are taxing theirs. And if you're successful enough as a Wisconsin business, which we have many of them, to sell something overseas, you can bring that money back now. You don't have to keep it overseas. So the Congressional Budget Office is now telling us, for the first time since the Bush administration, they are increasing their projections of economic growth. They've always been downgrading their projections. They're increasing their projections. They think we'll hit 3.3% growth by the end of the year. That gets us out of the slog we were in for the last 8 years, where we had 1% to 2% economic growth. The difference in those numbers is wages, it's benefits, it's living standards, it's opportunities. So when we finished our tax bill, we went on to working on rebuilding our military. That's something that I got greatly involved in this particular job. Was very worried about the hollowing out of our military. We lost 80 people in the military last year alone in simply training accidents, in training and equipment malfunctions. That's 4 times as many people we lost in combat last year. And so we really needed to rebuild our military to make sure that our men and women who put their lives on the line for us are actually doing so with the kind of training they need and the equipment that upholds them. It's not a coincidence that this new budget for our military makes sure that the F-35 tranche comes to Truax Field. We're really excited about that. So we see a military that's being rebuilt, an economy that's growing. The capstone of our regulatory reform efforts will be realized in about a month or so when we pass our Dodd-Frank rewrite. That bill is already out of the Senate. That's going to come through the House. If you look at any town in Wisconsin, odds are that business gets their credit from a community bank. This law did more damage to close community banks. We're losing 1 a day in America. That was the rate we were on. This law has done more damage to shut down or dry up the credit flowing from community banks in our communities than anything else. And so we're going to fix that too. So we feel that we've gotten a great economic agenda through. We've gotten a good foreign policy, military agenda through. And what we want to finish the year on are 2 other last components of our agenda, namely infrastructure. We're going to start next week with our FAA bill, which is airports and runways and air traffic. And then we want to go to water infrastructure. For us, think about all the grain that leaves to the Mississippi River, locks and dams, and goes down to the Gulf of Mexico. Think about all the issues we have up in Lake Michigan. So we're going to do a water infrastructure bill after that. But the one issue that I hear most about from employers now that they see sound regulations, now that taxes are down, and Pat, what is the number of reduction in rates that consumers in Wisconsin have seen? $275 million, I think. Yeah, total reduction of benefit tax. Meaning consumers will benefit $275 million just in Wisconsin because of the tax law. You're seeing stuff like that now happening. Now we want to work on people. People getting skills to get good jobs and get good careers. We have a skills gap in America, in Wisconsin. We have an opportunity gap. That's what we want to focus on now. I can't tell you how many employers I've talked to who say, this is my biggest concern now is getting people, getting workers. I need machinists, I need electricians, I need plumbers, I need accountants, I need people. Well, we've got 6.5 million job openings in America today, but we have more than that of people in America who are working age, who are able-bodied, who aren't in the game. We want to get them in the game, meaning we want to get them in the ladder of life to get opportunities. They're not working, they're not looking for work, or they're not in school. So we want to pull people off the sidelines, off of welfare, into the workforce. And this is where I'm very excited about what Wisconsinites are doing. There are community colleges, technical colleges in Wisconsin, MATC, Gateway, Blackhawk Tech, MATC over in Milwaukee, that are really teaming up with employers to train young people, even in high school, to get the skills they need to get the careers they want that are being offered here in Wisconsin. This is the best way to reverse our brain drain. Good jobs, good wages, good careers, but you've got to get these people with the skills. So our career and technical education bill is already out of the House. This dramatically streamlines all of this myriad of programs, sets those dollars back to the states so that our local educators, businesses can team up to come up with the kind of curriculum that is needed to train tomorrow's workforce for the jobs that are going to be here. The other thing is we want to make sure that we pull people from welfare to work. We just moved the Farm Bill out of the Ag Committee yesterday. That Farm Bill has the farm program payments, but 80% of the Farm Bill are food stamps. And we want to make sure that if a person is work capable, is working age, is able-bodied, doesn't have small kids, doesn't have a physical problem, we want to make sure that they're looking for work or they're going to school. So we're going to say you have to have a work requirement, 20 hours a week for people who are able-bodied, work capable, working age. You got to go do 20 hours a week, either working or going to school. And this will provide the resources to go to school so that when you get into Black Hawk Tech or Gateway or wherever that would be, to go get good careers. We want to pull people into the workforce. That is, I think, one of the most important things we can do to fundamentally reset our economy and our society to close that opportunity gap, to close that skills gap. So that is essentially the Better Way agenda that we all ran on in 2016 that we're executing. The one thing that I wish we could have done better, we passed this bill out of the House, but not the Senate, was the health care bill. Premiums are increasing. Scott just submitted a good idea for doing risk pools. We think the risk pool, the HRSP system, worked really well in Wisconsin that we used to have before it was repealed by Obamacare. So we think there are some good solutions. We repealed the individual mandate. We did some other good things. And I think things like that the states are innovating in ways of making sure that people with catastrophic illnesses get affordable coverage, and that can help reduce prices for everybody else. Those are the kinds of things that we would like to see the states lead on, that we'd like to help them do that. And that basically is what we have done. Now, people always wonder, like, you just made this announcement a couple weeks ago. Why did you make this announcement? It really is basically two reasons. I am very pleased with what we've been able to accomplish. I'm very pleased with his agenda that we ran on, asked the country for permission to execute, won the election, and then executed it. I'm very pleased that since I was before in Congress working on tax reform, we finally overhauled the tax code. I'm very pleased with elements of that tax code like empowerment zones, something I worked on when I was working for Jack Kemp. 25% of the poorest census tracts in America now are empowerment zones. 25% of Wisconsin's poorest census tracts that's already been approved are empowerment zones. That means anybody can go sell an asset, not pay capital gains on that sale, invest it in these poor census tracts, keep your money there, working, hiring, bringing economic growth, and you keep it there for 10 years, you don't pay capital gains tax on it. This is an idea that we've been working on for decades to get capital in the poorest communities of our state and our nation. That's now the law of the land, and we're really excited about seeing that taking off. So there are so many things that we've been able to do in a very short period of time that I feel very, very gratified with that. And when your kids are 13, 14, and 16, and you're only home on weekends, it really starts pulling at you. And so I live in Janesville. I don't live in D.C., but I work in D.C. And then when we're in recess, I'm running around America. That's what this job requires. It's a pace I'm happy to do for 3 years, but if I knew if I did it for 2 more years, given the agenda that we've been able to accomplish, I would be that kind of guy who my kids would only know me as a weekend dad. And it just is not something that I was willing to do. So I am just expressing gratitude to the people who sent me there to work for them. I am so thankful to the people of the 1st Congressional District who took this risk on a 28-year-old guy from Janesville to go represent them in Congress 20 years ago. It's been the honor of my life professionally, and it's been phenomenal to have these opportunities. And I'm just so thankful. And this state produces those kinds of opportunities and gives people those kinds of chances. And so just as a Wisconsinite, it's something that I'm extremely humbled and honored by, and I just wanted to come by and say thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Questions from the audience? Yeah. Tell me who you are and everything, too, what you do.
Phil Fritchie, I'm a chamber director in Wisconsin and sit on the board of the WMC. Are you envisioning that you're going to endorse somebody to run the Republican ticket
in my district? I feel very, very good about our district. I know we're going to hold the seat. I'm very confident of that. I'll make that decision later on. The filing deadline's still open, so I just want to be respectful to all the folks who are thinking about it, looking at it, getting in the race. And so I'll wait to see after that filing deadline.
I was heartsick when I heard that you're leaving the speakership of the House, but I have to commend you for the noble reason that you're doing it. God bless you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I also think there's something about voluntarily giving up power. I think that's an important statement to make. I think power, such as you define it, I think it's important for leaders and elected officials to be willing to give up power when they have it, when they don't have to. I think it's the right message and signal to send to our youth and just to the world that in a republic like ours, in a democracy like ours, this is what we do.
That's what our founding fathers.
It's what our founding fathers envisioned. And frankly, I didn't know that I'd be in Congress for 20 years. I'm 48. I got there when I was 28. And so I just felt like 20 years is a really good time, a real good run. Especially when my kids weren't even born when I got elected. I wasn't married. I was single when I got elected. So to see them grow up when I'm always heading out to D.C. every week, I want to be able to spend the kind of time that that parents usually get to spend. So I think giving up power voluntarily at a moment like this, I think is important. The last point I'd say is I could have done the political thing, which is what the political people say is run and then hang it up, 4 days later before leadership elections start. That means I'd have to be dishonest to everybody. That's not what we do in Wisconsin. That's not how we should conduct ourselves. So it really wasn't that hard of a decision to make. Yeah.
Doug Fearing, from Fearing's Audio Video Security here in Madison. My question is more as a grandfather than it is a businessman.
You're a grandfather?
I am a grandfather, yes. But my question goes to the deficit. I just read in Fox News the other day the Dallas Fed chair saying we're on an unsustainable debt trend, and we've got a Republican Congress and a Republican president, and the last spending bill was just gigantic, made no steps towards that. So where is any hope with all of this going?
The defense budget's still smaller today in real terms than it was 8 years ago. The real problem we had with on discretionary spending, that's called discretionary spending, is our military got hollowed out. And it was really putting us at risk, and it was costing people their lives. So that was our equity, was to get in and get that the sequester hit the Defense Department hard. And the money, meaning the budget challenge, is not in what we call discretionary spending. That's about a third of our budget, and that is the annual agency budgets. The CBO projects over the next decade it's going to grow $300 to $400 billion over the next decade, which over 10 years is not much in a federal budget that's over $4 trillion annually. Revenues are increasing. Even after cutting tax rates on families and businesses, personal income tax revenues rise over the decade, corporate income tax revenues rise over the decade. Entitlement spending grows by $2 trillion. And so the 2/3 of the budget, which is quickly becoming 100% of the budget on its current path, crowding out everything else, are entitlements. And it really is the healthcare entitlements that are the ones that drive the cost. And it's not a partisan thing. It's baby boomers are retiring. We're nearly doubling the amount of retirees in this country. And the costs of the programs and medical inflation goes up a lot faster than ordinary inflation. And that's what you have to fix. I'm proud that ever since I was budget chair, the House has passed a budget every term that balances the budget and pays off the debt. The last one we passed in May, the Diane Black budget, cut $7.4 trillion in spending over just the next 10 years. The House has always passed these bills. We have not once gotten the Senate to pass a bill like that. The biggest entitlement reform bill ever considered by a Congress ever was our health care bill that we passed last year. That took 2 of the 3 healthcare entitlement bills and put them on a very sound financial footing. Saved $1 trillion, I'm rounding the numbers here, roughly $1 trillion over the next decade, and trillions in the out years of unfunded liabilities that would have been wiped off the books. That bill, which would have given Wisconsin more control over our health insurance markets, to lower our prices, to have risk pools so people with catastrophic insurance, with catastrophic illnesses got good coverage, and everybody else would have lower prices. And it would have saved us trillions in the long run. That bill passed the House, and it failed by 1 vote. Remember that video? It failed by 1 vote in the Senate. That one move took the biggest opportunity we've ever had on fundamental entitlement reform and killed it by one vote. So in the House, we've been able to do this. We've done it over and over and over again, but we've not been able to get this stuff through the Senate. I think at the end of the day, we have to work on healthcare reforms that get at the root cause of health inflation, which is more innovation. Don't have a government take over of healthcare. Don't have monopolies in healthcare, which is what Obamacare essentially does. Decentralize and have competition and choice so we can get prices down. I think that's inevitable. And we've done some incremental things to do that. We got rid of the individual mandate. We got rid of the price controlling body called the IPAB. So we've done, after that bill failed in the Senate, we've passed some pretty good incremental reforms. One of them saved us $200 billion already over the decade. I think ultimately you'll probably have to get a commission because we do not have support from the other party. And you can't do something this big and this profound without some bipartisan buy-in. And the last commission that did any good, meaning that did something, was the Greenspan Commission in the 80s on Social Security. Bowles-Simpson didn't work, in my judgment. I was on it because it was stacked politically, so it wasn't equal between the two parties, and it didn't have what we call fast-track authority, where Congress, then it was Pelosi and Obama, they chose to ignore it, so they could ignore it, and they did ignore it. So I think a commission that's equal between House and Senate, and I mean between Republicans and Democrats. I think of the Senate like as the Democrats aren't our enemies. The Senate is. That's the same. That's the phrase we use. That's a joke, by the way, for the media. It's a joke. That's just the phrase we use in the House. You know, we get a little frustrated with their rules. We pass over 500 bills. 400 of them are still sitting in the Senate. And then fast track procedures, so that you have to have an up or down vote. I think at the end of the day, that's probably what's going to be required. But you cannot do this without growing the economy, getting people working and paying taxes. That's being done. Tackling entitlements. And it's really healthcare, getting healthcare fixed. That's really the issue for the long-term debt. But as far as this majority is concerned in the House, we're there, we've been there. Getting the rest of government to do the same has been the challenge that's gotten away from us. Yeah. Oh, hey, Tim, how you doing? Good to see you.
The new tax bill creates limits on deductibility of state and local taxes.
Yes.
And a number of states, very notable and impressive, are trying to create workarounds.
Not gonna happen.
Standpoint. That's my question. Is it? It's when you're here and you're saying, "Okay, I'm complying with that." It's kind of scary to think someone in California is going to in a different situation.
I don't think. First of all, so the question is about. Some people are a little salty these days. That's the adjective we use. The state and local tax deduction. Let me describe it this other way. Wisconsin and about 45 other states were paying higher taxes at the federal level for basically 4 big states. And so as your representative here, was a little tired of having you pay higher taxes so you could have unaccountable big government in a few big states. Because they would just crank up their taxes, crank up their government, and then tell their constituents, don't worry, it's deductible at the federal level. And that means we all paid higher federal taxes as a result. So this, if anything, helps equalize that burden, and it unmasks unaccountable big government. And it gave us the fiscal space we needed to lower your tax rates across the board. The workaround won't work because it violates the law, and the IRS, I believe, before it even gets to Congress, the IRS, I believe, will disallow that. You can't call the taxes you pay charitable donations. You know, that's what some of these states are considering. So I just don't think that that's going to work. I think what these states are trying to do is anything but looking at whether or not they're taxing their people too much or they have too big a government. They're just going to have to face up to that, which is, look, I represent the Illinois state line. I have so many conversations. Scott and I tag team employers all the time to say, come to Wisconsin. Pat, yeah, I mean, you know this. We do it. Come to Wisconsin. We've got better power. We've got the best. No, but we've got sound government. We've got, we don't have this pension problem that Illinois has. And all of that is basically recruiting people to Wisconsin. There's no way Foxconn would have come here if they did not think we had good, solid state government. I know that for a fact. We have great workforce, we're well located, and all the rest. But because we have good, sound government, Foxconn is here. So these states that keep raising their taxes, keep going into debt, they're just going to have to face up with that. And I don't think it's our job as taxpayers in the other states to paper that over. Yeah. Hey, Mike.
Speaker Ryan, Mike Laskowitz from Rock Automation. You're a young man, you're a smart guy, you've proven your commitment to public service. Can you give us any thoughts on what's next?
My plan is to come up with a plan in 2019. So I want to just run through the tape. I just mentioned a bunch of the things we're trying to do. We've got infrastructure bills, the Dodd-Frank replacement bill, the workforce development bills, a farm bill. So finish the job, keep the seat in the first district, keep our majority, and then I will figure all that stuff out in 2019. I will, just kind of relax and figure it out. I don't think it's in my interest to spend my time thinking about other stuff when I have still a big job to do. So I'm just going to spend my time focusing on this job now, and I'll figure it out later on. What I told my wife is I'd like to just go get some snowmobiles, go up to St. Germain, spend a week snowmobiling and ice fishing, and she says, no, we're going to a beach. So, So, yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, right. This is January we're talking about here, so. Yeah.
So if we see something on the lines of 3.2% GDP growth, what kind of impact could that revenue have if you wanted to, if we had a Congress that wanted to do something about debt deficit?
Meaning do nothing and it goes to debt and deficit reduction. It helps shrink that deficit. So the challenge is, and this was before this year, this is for many years, the structural pressure on the fiscal balance sheet, the baseline, is to hit trillion-dollar deficits because baby boomers are retiring. And that means more people going into the column of not paying taxes but using benefits that they earned. That has to be addressed. But the faster the economy grows, the more revenues come in, the better it makes everything better off. It lowers those deficits. So we get that kind of growth, then that means Congress doesn't do anything on this point so that it goes to reducing the deficit. So don't spend it, use it to reduce the deficit to get our fiscal balance sheet in order. That's what we would do. Yeah. Kurt.
Where are we on NAFTA renegotiation? And the president flirted with the idea of maybe going back into TPP. Where do we stand on all of those trade issues? And if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about the tariff, that obviously has an impact.
Which one?
On steel and aluminum,
Okay.
largely. That's we've got a steel manufacturer in Wisconsin. We've got an aluminum manufacturer, but we also have heavy industry that buys a lot of those things, and the prices are going up.
You have far more here that consume steel and aluminum than produce it by multiples. So there are I've been speaking with the administration daily on this. I've got a call on the way down to Janesville on this. They're in the middle of trying to close out NAFTA negotiations right now. Some of the issues that are outstanding that need to be addressed that we care about are like dairy. It's a big issue. There's a softwood lumber issue, which matters to the paper manufacturers up in the north part of the state. And then we've got some real opportunities on NAFTA if we get it right. Energy is a perfect example. NAFTA was negotiated before the internet existed, so there are all those issues that come into play. So those negotiations are literally underway right now between the three countries, and so that's a current moment right now. As you know, I did not like the steel tariff idea. I did not like the 232 is what we call it. I did not think that was the right thing to do. For the basic reason is it was going to raise a lot of prices and put a lot of manufacturers in a very bad situation, and then create some scarcities. What we asked the administration to do is make this targeted and focused. And that's the one point where I agree with the administration. There are unfair trade practices that are occurring. Namely, China is cheating. They do steal intellectual property, right? They are dumping and transshipping, meaning dumping through third-party countries. And we should go focus on that and not try to raise prices across the world by hitting tariffs on our allies that aren't doing that. So since they did that, the consultations they've had with us have been very fruitful, and the administration has exempted Europe, North America, Brazil, South Korea, a lot of our trading allies and partners. And therefore, they've been much more circumspect and much more targeted on going after steel dumping that legitimately is occurring, and not trying to use it as a reason just to raise prices writ large. Now, even when you do something like this, it's going to create price increases. And talk about precision over in Elkhorn. I don't know if Rick wants me. Well, I think he probably wouldn't mind if I say this. I was touring Precision Metal Parts just the other day. They have to get this certain kind of aluminum from Austria for their auto parts that they make. They can't get it from Alcoa. They don't make the kind they need. They get it from Austria. And it runs through their CNC machines, and they employ, I don't know, a couple hundred people there. The price is now jacked up massively, so that really puts them in duress. Scott Forge down in Clinton, I was just talking to Scott Forge the other day. Most of the steel that they use is domestic, produced domestically, but there's still a big price increase they got because of this. So what you're seeing is a big price increase, even among domestic producers. So that is rippling through the economy in a way that has consequences. So my hope is that we stay focused on unfair trade practices, namely China, and that we focus on getting resolution to that, so that it's all win-win. On TPP, the president just had Abe down to Mar-a-Lago. I know Abe well. I've talked to him for years. He really wants to get us into TPP. I think the last administration made a few mistakes in how they did TPP. I've got personal gripes about what they did on TPP, but nevertheless, I think it would be a good idea. Get it in a good place, fix the flaws, and if you really want to have a good aggressive agenda with respect to China, TPP is one of those solutions, because it gets that region to play on our rules. And that's the purpose of getting a trade agreements. If you add up all the countries we have trade agreements with, we have a surplus. And so getting other countries to agree to play by our rules and treat us fairly is what we want to have happen. So we want to go out and get agreements. Now, when they cheat, we have a mechanism to go call them to the carpet on that. It's basically the countries that we don't have trade agreements where this stuff's happening. We don't have one with China, of course. And most of this dumping that is occurring, or the theft of our intellectual property, is occurring from China. And so that's where I think we should be focusing a lot of our efforts on, and that's what the White House has more recently been doing. So my hope is, I was just talking to the Quad Graphics guys, the paper tariffs on newspaper has created a huge price increase on newspaper, and there's not enough domestic supply of newspaper quality paper. And so newspapers are struggling as it is. So these kinds of trade moves have consequences. And so our hope is that we don't go down the tariff route, because tariffs have these kinds of consequences. And we go down the route of making sure that if people are cheating on something, we call them to the carpet. And that's to me the better way to go. Be more surgical.
You also have to protect the national electrical grid in this country, or industry, until it comes to a speaking.
That's EMP, and we all know that issue very, very well. You're right about that. Yeah, it's about $10 billion, isn't it? Yeah.
Suzanne Kelly, Waukesha County Business Alliance. There's a lot of focus right now on personal data, privacy.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on the role of government regulating all of this, if it should?
No, there's clearly a role. What we want to do is understand it better. What Congress often does is they overreact and they don't do it properly. So when you have Sarbanes-Oxley, Dodd-Frank, when you have some kind of problem, Congress knee-jerks and misses the mark. So what we want to make sure is that we get this right and we understand exactly fully what we're doing. So there's clearly, this is why we're having all these hearings. We're not just doing hearings with Mark Zuckerberg to get press. We're doing hearings, lots of hearings, to get our mind around, this is the internet, it's the 21st century, people's privacy rights are clearly being compromised. What do we do about it? And that is where we want to make sure that we don't stifle innovation in the internet. We don't make it harder for businesses. What we also don't want to do is erect barriers to entry for tomorrow's disruptor not to be able to go in and disrupt. So we want to have an innovation economy. We want to encourage disruption. We want to encourage small businesses while we figure out how to, in this ever-changing technological environment, how do we protect people's privacy? And that is why we're taking a very wide view of how to do this. And there are a lot of good ideas that are being kicked around. And we're going to spend a great deal of time figuring that out, how to do that. One of those ideas is having you own your data, and you are the owner of it. And the question is, well, then how do you do that? And so there's a lot of ideas like that. But this is 21st century issue right in front of us. It concerns every single one of us, and we want to make sure that we get it right without stifling innovation or propping up existing companies and making it harder for anybody to compete with them. And that's a really important point. Yeah.
I'm Ashley Ellis from BMO Harris Bank. You mentioned a little bit about the banking bill. There's a lot of unease in the industry about the path forward. I think we all sort of know what it needs to look like to get to the finish line. What do you see as the process?
I feel very good about it. The Senate. The reason I feel very good about this getting done is because the Senate already passed a bill, and the House, like I said, we're the ones who it's much easier for us to pass legislation than the Senate. So I would take that bill and bank that as the base case, and then now what we're looking at, and our chairman, a guy named Henschling from Texas, is working with the Senate now to see what can we add to it, because what the House has done is we passed a big Dodd-Frank repeal and replace bill last June, I believe it was. And then we've taken that bill into about 35 pieces, passed those separate pieces, and those individual components have gotten huge bipartisan votes, 350, 400 votes in Congress. Lots of Democrats support many changes to that law that was not included in the Senate bill. So now what we're looking at is what more can we add to make this reform even better than what the Senate has. So if I were you as a banker, I would think in my mind, take the Senate bill as the base case, and then the question is how much more reform can we have on top of it that is truly bipartisan. And that's the kind of conversations we're having right now. Yeah.
Saw a report yesterday from the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Despite everything that the Trump administration has done from a regulatory standpoint, and it's been pretty incredible. But in 2017, Congress enacted 97 laws, and the federal agencies enacted over 3,200
Regulations.
What can be done to get the lawmaking back into the legislative branch where it belongs instead of by fiat?
I can give you a treat on the filibuster if you'd like me to, but so you said we enacted 97 laws last year. We passed, last year we passed about 400 bills. So that just shows you the shortfall between what got through the Senate and what got into law. And when the Senate's still doing people. That's what the part of the problem that the Senate has of responsibility we don't have, which is judges. They just they've had this guy up for he's a House member to be the NASA director. He was nominated, like a year ago. He just yesterday finally got confirmed to be the NASA director. It just takes forever for the Senate, because the minority can take up to 30 hours of a person that can filibuster. They can't filibuster people, but they can slow the thing up. So the Senate takes all this time just getting people populating the administration, ambassadors, secretaries, assistant secretaries, administrators, judges. They're getting through that list, and that means the faster they get through that list, the more they can spend their time on legislating. So we're anticipating the Senate going to have more time on legislating. So we hope to get through the backlog. But your basic question is a constitutional one, Scott, which is Article 1 of the Constitution says that the elected branch of government, the one that you all vote for, your members of Congress, that's the law-writing branch of government. Article 2 is the executive branch of government implements and executes those laws. And the problem with this regulatory state we have is most of the laws that are being written that we experience as people are written by unelected bureaucrats in government agencies that do it through rules and regulations. So one of the first bills we passed in the House this session, back in last January, the one before, is the REINS Act. Wisconsin does this, and I think 31 other state legislatures do this. For a major rule or regulation that has the full force of law, that is supposedly derived from a law Congress writes, it has to come back to Congress for a final vote, approval, or amendment before it goes into effect. We've passed that for many years. We passed it. That's one of our 400-plus bills sitting in the Senate. So what we're saying is, for these big regulations that go out and you experience, that has to come back to Congress to make sure it jives with the original intent of the law writers who wrote the law, to make sure that they're implementing it properly. And I think that gives the proper level of oversight of the legislative branch, the elected branch, over the unelected branch, the executive branch. Like I said, they do it here in Madison. They do it in, I forgot what the committee's called, the Rules Committee, I think. That's something that we think is very important, and we think it will restore the balance of power so that we are self-governing people and that we're constitutional. That bill is being filibustered in the Senate with all these other bills, and that's our present challenge. The last thing on this point I've been working on is we write laws that are too vague, and Congress has been doing that for a long time. When I chaired the Ways and Means Committee, I worked with a guy, I won't say his name, I don't want to give him too much press, he would hate that if I did this, but he's a lawyer. We have these lawyers called the Office of Legislative Counsel. They are our bill drafters. So we use these nonpartisan professional bill drafters, just like we have a Congressional Budget Office and a Joint Committee on Taxation, we have the Office of Legislative Counsel. They're the ones who draft our bills. You say, I have an idea, I want a law to do this, that's who you call, they draft it, and then you work on the draft text. The person that I worked with most as Ways and Means Chairman was the tax office. Tax laws had to be really precise, had to be very specific. Tim knows what I'm talking about. You have to be really specific with tax laws so that the intent of the statute in the Congress is really clear and not a lot of gray area. So what we did was I took the guy who was in charge of the tax division and made him in charge of the entire Legislative Council to train all the other bill drafters how to be very prescriptive and very specific on how you write bills. So what I in my tenure have done is I've made sure that when we write laws where Congress is not delegating all this loose, broad authority to unelected bureaucrats, we're writing very tight, very specific statutes. That means you have to think through a little bit more about what you want your law to look like, how it's going to be executed, so there's not all this gray area that's made up by unelected bureaucracies or reinterpreted down the road by another administration. So that is sort of the habit that we have now put ourselves into, tightening up the way we write bills. But at the end of the day, I really do believe you've got to restore the constitutional balance of power by having all the major regulations go through Congress before they actually go into effect.
Oh, we have time for one more question.
Yeah.
Hi, Siobhan Cook, Safety Manager with the Wisconsin Safety Council. We just held our 76th Annual Safety and Health Conference and Expo earlier this week, and one of the topics that I heard a lot of our attendees discussing was in regards to our nation's opioid crisis.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if maybe you could shed some light on your thoughts.
Yeah, I probably should have mentioned this earlier. We plan on bringing a whole number of opioid bills through Congress, and I believe those will make it into law as well. We passed about 2 years ago our 21st Century Cures bill, which was our bill. We think we have a real shot at cancer, curing cancer, literally. You got to see what they're doing over here at the Weissman Center in Madison. We think we wanted to put more money into research. That bill also had an opioid component to it. And so what that bill did, which this budget agreement that is not real popular because it was all the funding bills in one, it funded our opioid treatment bill. So now we have, because of our new opioid law and our new appropriations, dollars going out into communities. And here's the issue that we've learned on opioids. It is just rampant. I don't need to go off on that, but there are different communities that are coming up with different solutions that are pretty innovative and are working pretty well. And what we want to do is test these ideas and see what works best. Chad Woodman in Janesville, who's I've known him just about all my life. He's a police officer in Janesville, attached to the opioid task force, working with all the counselors, working with the schools, working with law enforcement, tying everybody, all the stakeholders who touch this issue in Rock County now sit on a board with one another and come up with ideas, and they figure out how to handle people. And that's because of a grant that they got to be able to do this. That is being deployed nationwide now. So we have those resources going out the door to counties and communities to attack opioids. The point of that is then to go get lessons learned about what is the best way to deal with this and test different ideas. And then we're now going to be legislating on pharma, on fentanyl, on all this other stuff. So the Commerce Committee has about 6 or 8 bills since we've been doing this research for 2 years that we've learned, and so we intend on doing some more opioid legislating to get at this. It's about access, it's about prescriptions, it's about, antidotes, and it's about, honestly, that's one of the reasons why we do have to secure our border. It is very cheap. These illicit drugs are very cheap, they're very prevalent, and most of it comes through the southern border, and we've got to fix that too. So that's an issue that's front and center. We've done a lot of legislating on, and we're going to do some more. So thanks for the question. Thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thank you.